Inflation, supply shortages, very big problems in terms of competition in the market because you don't get competitors coming in when the government decides pricing. She was basing that off the idea of gouging under state laws like Texas. If there's a flood, there's a short period where they go after people that raise prices, but you can't do that nationally and nobody wants it. I think it's a very populist idea, impossible to implement, would never pass Congress. But a lot of these proposals have not been scrutinized by you, reporters, on a one-on-one interview to actually understand how they'd be implemented. This is an incredibly bad idea, tried in the 70s in America. It doesn't work in Venezuela, North Korea, anywhere. It's un-American, and so everybody knows that. The reason there's been so much inflation in housing is not just the market, it's the regulatory environment. California's a very good example. Half the cost of a house, 40 to 50%, is the cost of the regulatory hurdle to get the permit in the first place. So that has to be changed. Now, this idea of giving free money from a helicopter in an inflated market that's tight, where there's no supply, and the reason there's no supply is half the mortgages that are still out there for the next 3 years are at under 4%. So if you own one of those mortgages, you're never going to sell your house. You don't want to pay 7.2% mortgage. You're not dumb. That's why there's no supply. So this idea that you're going to give $25,000 of free dollars to people, let's say there's one house on your street for sale, and all of a sudden you give 9 buyers $25,000 more dollars each. All of that goes to the seller. They'll just raise their price $25,000. This idea is beyond insane. It's the worst policy I've ever heard, and everybody in real estate knows it's a non-starter. That's the second idea I know would never stick, never get through Congress. I mean, how many ways can you think to print money? That's why you have inflation. You got to stop. Remember, this is the same person, and she's going to have to take scrutiny on this and questions, that signed that bill that we didn't need, the Inflation Reduction Act. That ended up being very inflationary. I'm worried about something far more sinister. The idea to raise capital gains tax to make America uncompetitive. You got to think about capital. We're the #1 economy on earth. Most foreign capital wants to invest in America because it's competitive. But when all of a sudden you make us, and you're looking at the G20, all countries where your sovereign wealth, you want to put $100 billion to work in infrastructure, you care about capital gains tax. You care about the corporate tax rate. Remember, 82% of jobs in America are created by private companies that are corporations. That's who America works with and for, and how we pay for our society. Why do you want to punish them for success? And so at the end of the day, when you make yourself so uncompetitive in the plethora of economies that compete with us, and all of a sudden say corporate tax rates are the highest now, we're in the bottom quartile of competition, it'll be like what happened when we had 28% plus corporate taxes when companies started going to Ireland. We've already tried this. It doesn't work. This is a really, really, really bad idea. Incredibly bad policy. Controlling prices just doesn't work. It distorts markets, causes inflation, reduces supply, and the capex on buildings collapses. Everything looks like it just was made 100 years ago and falling apart. I don't know where these ideas are coming from. When you really start thinking pragmatically about these ideas, you understand how bad they are. And everybody that we care about now needs to understand, look, I'm a small business owner, I'm running a dry cleaners, and you're telling me I owe you $800,000 4 years after I open it that I don't have? I mean, think about that. Yeah. That just makes no sense whatsoever. That's so un-American. It's un-American. The Democratic Party lost its way. They're no longer in touch with the electorate. There was a certain arrogance they had, and I think the problem started when Biden left the ticket, because in the democratic process, usually you have a convention, and so you start from scratch. And that process weeds out any weakness in candidates. If they have an inability to articulate their position, for example, or they're not able to debate their colleagues or whatever. But the other advantage of the convention, and there's been many very famous conventions back as far as the 40s, 50s, and 60s, is that the party realigns itself with a new message because it's trying to figure out what's the best candidate for the times. And they also get a tremendous amount of press, almost 5-6 weeks of press. That's not what happened here. What occurred was, I don't know if you want to call them the party elite, but the Pelosi's, the Schumers, the Obama,
the deep
even
state,
some movie stars, they said, well, we're going to anoint Harris. And that was a mistake. Harris, while a very fine person, I'm sure, has never won anything. And last time she tried this, she didn't get a single delegate. So in 2020 and 2019, she failed. 2020, she failed. She failed again in 2024. The analogy I think is best serving this thing is the Super Bowl of all political contests on earth is the American presidential election. There's no greater political event on earth. And if your quarterback gets injured, which is what Biden was, you don't put in a new quarterback that's never played a game or ever won one, ever. They got shellacked, and they've learned an important lesson. I looked at that map, the electoral map, while covering the election. It was turning redder than a lobster being boiled. He just took the nation. And I think they're doing a little soul searching now, but they had it coming to them. As I like to say, Trump did them a huge favor. He actually helped that party. They don't know it yet, but they're going to have to take a spatula to it and scrape all of those candidates away and start from scratch with new leadership. They'll be a very competitive party. There's a lot of talent in the Democratic Party that never got a chance to compete. Now they will. Some of the ideas being proposed, specifically taxing unrealized gains, that's un-American. The idea of price controls, Soviet-style price controls, that's un-American. So when you get that lost, the system corrects itself, and that's exactly what happened. That's the amazing thing about democracy. When you try and stretch it too far in any direction, boom, it self-corrects. You happen to be in the way of the self-correction, you get decimated, and that's what happened to that party. What he did do is keep alive the concept of free speech, because in a democracy, you're always dealing with 2.5% lunatic fringe. The cost of freedom of speech is the lunatic fringe. The minute you try and shut down the lunatic fringe, you're moving away from the concept freedom of speech. Everybody has a voice. You may not like what they say, but because they're part of the narrative, that is the core and the DNA of democracy. And so many ideas get tested, some get thrown out. And when you try and change that, again, the system self-corrects, and that's what happened here. So it's a very divided country now. We are going to have a new president with a full mandate, the Senate and the House and the presidency. You can get a lot done for the first 2 years when you control everything. And so that's what's going to happen. Well, he's actually signaled the market that he intends to hire seasoned veterans, AAA players that don't have a mandate to go in the White House and write a book 6 weeks later after they're fired. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want a rotating door anymore. He wants A players, and he's grooming his, he's got some very interesting people working on the inside to find the right people for every single position in cabinet. And I think it's going to be a fantastic government because it's going to focus on what the people want. They want security at the border. They've already said that. They want a reduction in inflation. The way you do that is you reduce energy costs. They want to strip away all the regulatory environment that the Biden administration put on. $1 trillion worth of burdensome regulation. He will tear that off like a Band-Aid, rip it right off. And the economy, as you can see, indexed by the market, the buoyancy that happened as soon as they figured out that he was going to be president, was pretty happy with that outcome. This is good for business. And when the economy is buoyant and people are getting employed, it's good for everybody. The Democrats are licking their wounds, but in 6 weeks, everybody forget about it and we'll move on. It'll be a great thing for everybody. I think the U.S. is in a renaissance period. And I'm not really shilling for politicians. I never do that. I shill for policy. I care about policy. I care about entrepreneurship. I care about investing. I care about the American dream. I'm an ambassador for it. I want that to work because my family is American and they're working in the U.S. I want the best we can get for that country every day. And this is how you do it. Trump scares his adversaries because he's unpredictable. When you know what your adversary is going to do all the time and they signal it to you beforehand, you're not scared of him anymore. They're scared less of Trump. And that's, excuse my French, but that's basically how it works. That's why you're seeing all these guys saying, oh, we want to have peace now. Now we want to stop, because he's very unpredictable. So in the case of China, squeezing the supreme leader to the table is a good thing. So I would like to go to 400% tariffs. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. Tariffs are temporary. They're a negotiating tactic. But if you're going to put them on, don't screw around. Go to 400%. Make it impossible for them to sell any widgets anywhere. So if you put 400% on an EV, no one's going to buy it. Only the Chinese can buy it. So all the people making the EVs, no bread, no butter. That's how you do it. Now, if I was the minister of Chinese head squeezing, that's how I would do it. And believe me, they will be at the table so fast because they cannot afford to have unemployment in that economy. And it's showing some cracks there. So you want to hit them while they're down and bring them to the table. They cheat on IP, they steal. You can't use their courts. A good example that people should focus on is TikTok. TikTok has been deemed Chinese spyware by the American Congress. That's a bipartisan bill. The servers are going to get turned off. I don't think he'll take an actual specific role in cabinet. I think what he will do is be a consultant for the American people, identify inefficiencies, and get the whacking stick out. I love that idea. I love the idea that we've never really scraped the fat out of the federal government, and it's big, porky, fat, dripping with opportunity to cut. But the only way you can do that is you need a mandate from the top dog, the president, because no agency wants to be downsized. You walk in saying, I want to fire a third of you. They're not going to help you. But he'll identify opportunity. I call it release the hounds, because what taxpayer, regardless of what your politics are, red or blue or independent, who wouldn't want to save money by just chopping out all the waste in the federal government? And I think if there's one man that has the ability to do that, proven executional skills, it's Elon Musk. So I really endorse this idea.
First of all, Freeland is the worst finance minister Canada's ever had because she's never run a financial institution. She started as a journalist. I'm sure she's a nice person, but that budget she just delivered gives you an idea of how incompetent she is. It's good she's gone, but she's not the real problem. It's Trudeau. I don't know if you've looked at any number you'd like to measure in the last 9 years. GDP per capita, capital flows out of Canada, the growth of the Canadian economy stalled out. The deficit, just this last horrific budget. I mean, I don't recall in my professional life seeing a collapse like this. That's why the Canadian dollar is in free fall. It's Justin Trudeau and his policies. And remember, we have to celebrate the fact, if you want to talk about longevity, he's been very successful as a prime minister, and he did it all without any executional skills. Now, the Canadian people pay the price, and it's just horrific what's happening to the country. Unbelievable mess. But let's talk about why this is happening to Trudeau and why he is embarrassing Canada so much. As you recall in Trump's first mandate, both Freeland and Trudeau bashed Trump almost every day they could, thinking he would never come into power. He is a relationship guy. He doesn't respect or like Trudeau. You've said so much in the last 2 or 3 days, as well as Freeland, who he despises from NAFTA 2 negotiations. She's gone. He would love to get rid of Trump. And I think he's doing a good job embarrassing every Canadian internationally with what he's doing with all of this social media. And Trump realizes that he won't be negotiating NAFTA 3 with Trudeau. Trudeau's going to be gone one way or another, and that's a very good thing for Canada. They just want to see their dollar in free fall. How long do they want to lose the value of their passport and the Canadian brand in places like Egypt, India, and China, where they don't even let us in anymore without a visa? Trudeau has done unbelievable damage to Canada over the last 9 years. Every Canadian has almost a moral obligation, regardless of where they come from or what their religion is or what party they're associated with, to get rid of this man. He is damaging the country, and I can't wait personally. I do everything I can every day. I broadcast all over the world talking about how weak he is as a leader and how important it is he must go. I'm doing my part. Every Canadian should ask themselves, what are we doing to get rid of this guy? Get a new leader now. If we want to compete with Trump, and believe me, he doesn't want to impose tariffs, not on energy or anything else. We're two big trading partners, particularly the states on the border themselves. You ask any governor or senator on a border state, they don't want this trade war. But we need a leader. And right now, I think what's going to happen, regardless of who they put in place to replace Trudeau, the Liberal Party is damaged. It has been very poor. Even Liberals now understand they're going to be decimated in the next election. So I don't know whether it'll be a full majority mandate for the Conservatives or whether it'll be a minority, but it doesn't matter. We need new leadership to start negotiating with Trump every day. And then, of course, in this very important NAFTA 3 negotiation, which we're going to be facing quite soon. So it's really about Pierre Poilievre. Will he get elected and when? And will he get a majority mandate? And it doesn't really matter at this point. It's just you gotta replace Trudeau. I mean, I'm here in Arizona. They're laughing at us. And I'm tired of it, and every Canadian should be the same way. They think this whole Trudeau thing with Trump is a joke. It can't get any worse. So think of it this way. I've talked to him, as many business and investors have. His mandate is 1, get rid of the carbon tax. Number 2, create an environment where capital wants to come back to Canada, because the outflow of Canada, including our own pension funds, has dropped by almost 70%. Our competitiveness against the G20 bottom quartile. And then just before Freeland quit, or whatever she did, she proposed corporate capital gains tax that would have blown us to pieces against the competitiveness of the United States. She must have assumed that Harris was going to get in at a 28% tax rate, but now we're talking 15 to 21, and she's proposing 32.